Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Learn Lounge, the series from SpringPod, where we're in conversation with some pretty incredible speakers about their career projects they've worked on, and even get some tips to help you figure out your next career steps. If this is the first time you're joining us today, here's a quick reminder of who SpringPod are. We are an early careers network for young people who help you make more informed decisions and take control over your future, be that going to university, apprenticeships, or going directly into the world of work. So far, we've had some incredible speakers from a range of different career paths, like the BAFTA-winning wildlife filmmaker, Sophie Darlington, Emmy Award-winning sound and ADR editor, Tim Hans, and talent manager, Verity Park, and many others as well. So if you missed any of those, don't worry, have no fear. Head over to our website, learn.springpod.co.uk, where you can catch up on all of those for free on demand. Now, just a couple of things before we start this session today. My name is Hope, and I'll be hosting this session. The talk should last around 45 minutes. If you have any questions at all, please use the Q&A function on Big Marker, and we'll answer those at the end. Remember to tag us on social media with that all-important hashtag #LearnLounge. And finally, we'll be raising money for the Children's Trust. So if you would like to donate, please do so. Now today, I'm sure you've seen her on the screen, we're joined by Dr Francesca Kinsella, a clinical lecturer in haematology, as well as a soon-to-be consultant in haematology at the University of Birmingham. The demand for skilled physicians, scientists, and medical professionals have continued to increase over the past few years. And with everything going on, aka coronavirus, we really appreciate the time Dr. Francesca has taken from her really busy schedule to share her career story with us here on Learn Lounge today. And definitely stay tuned for some career tips, especially if you're looking to go into something in the medical profession. So without further ado, welcome to Learn Lounge, Dr. Francesca. How are you today?
Hello, Hope. Thanks very much. I'm well. And are you?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for being so patient whilst I was saying my little spiel there. So I'm really excited to learn about your career journey today, as I'm sure all of our audience is. Thank you for everyone who's tuned in. There's quite a lot of you today, which is fantastic. Now, you are a trainee physician scientist, a role that has been described as the bridge between medicine and science. Can you explain this in a really simple nutshell for me and also our audience today?
Certainly, Hope. So hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you'll have something useful out of this today. I'll do my best. So I am a registrar currently in haematology, and I have been fortunate enough to combine my medical training towards consultancy in haematology with becoming a practicing scientist. It's meant that I've been able to complete a PhD and postdoctoral research training, and I have had my own funding to conduct projects. And the two align. So what I study in the laboratory very much is a part of and informs the clinical practice that I undertake in my everyday clinical practice.
Wow. I'm so excited to find out more about this. Is it something that you always wanted to be? For example, I know there's a lot of people who maybe at school and they're thinking, oh, I don't know what I want to do. Did you always know, and did that help you choose the qualifications that you went on to do?
I am one of those people. I would say that I identified medicine as something I would be very, very interested in doing quite early on. In fact, my Auntie Anne lays claim to the fact that I spent an entire car journey going around to her house, and by the end of the journey had decided I wanted to be a doctor, and at that point I was only 4 years of age. However, I absolutely entertained different ideas all throughout my school, and I think it was probably when I got to secondary school and I had an excellent form tutor who challenged me with a few different ideas that I suddenly realised, no, I think I want to do medicine. And that's it. Yeah. And I think once I had determined that that was the combination of careers I wanted to follow, science and or medicine, I was able to tailor and pursue things that were going to help me along that route.
So what subjects did you choose? I imagine it was like science, maybe maths. Is that about right?
So obviously, when I well, many moons ago, I did GCSEs. So I did obviously all the sciences, mathematics, but I place great value in being around a person, and I really enjoyed classics, Latin. I enjoyed that hugely, and history. It was a bit of a toss-up going into A levels as to whether or not I carried on with French and or Latin. But I think I was perhaps a little bit seduced by the offer of doing further mathematics. So I ended up doing chemistry, biology, maths, and further maths, all of which I loved. So I didn't lose out on anything. I add, in reflection, sometimes I look back and think, God, I wish I'd done Latin, or I wish I'd done French. You know, they were the other options that I had. But, you know, that such are the choices you make in life.
So how long have you been studying altogether? We know you're like in that same stage now to an extent, but what can our viewers today kind of expect from going into the medical profession in terms of the amount of years it takes?
Okay, so please bear in mind when I answer this that I haven't fully explained my career path yet, and I am a little bit of a slight exception, and I am at the furthest extreme, I would say. However, I went to medical school at age 18, straight from school, and I went to Birmingham Medical School, and which has a 5-year course, with the option to apply for intercalation, which is where you take an extra year to do science. I did that, so it was 6 years. It was always going to be a 6-year course, and many med schools actually just incorporate that and automatically will offer 6 years. So that's 6 years undergraduate training. And in the middle of that, I decided I enjoyed my intercalation so much, and the science I got to undertake, and the depth I got to study something in, that I applied and got a PhD. So I actually elongated my time at university by a further 3 years right in the middle. So I studied for 9 years at university. And then you come out at the other end, a foundation doctor in the UK, and you do 2 years of foundation training, which is broadly the same no matter where you do it, and gives you this. When I say that, I'm referring to the skills you acquire rather than actually the things you practice. And then you decide at that point, along broad lines, do you want to train to be a medic, a physician, a surgeon, a general practitioner, and a psychiatry, for example, and other things branch out at that point. I chose to become a physician, which was another 2 years. So that's 4 years after med school. And then I then obtained a training number to be a haematology trainee, and that's a 5-year training course. So that is a total of 9 years to be trained as a consultant after medical school. So the way I've done it again, I took more time out to undertake more science. I did a period of postdoctoral research, which was another 3 years. So I am now in my 12th year, having qualified. So I spent. You can do the maths. You can figure out my age. I'm sure you're all intelligent people. I have a big birthday coming up later this year, and I went to university in 1999, and I am just about approaching becoming a consultant. So, 21 years.
I mean, the thing is, if 9 years to someone might seem like, oh my goodness, that's so much time. But in the scheme of things, and especially if you're doing something you love, I'm sure it kind of flies by. It's not like,
yes,
yeah,
absolutely it did. And I think the key is if you know you're doing the right thing, then the time flies. And if something it doesn't feel right and it's dragging, then there's something wrong there. And that was a highly unusual route to take. So I'm not saying in any way that that's typical, but it was the right thing for me at the time, and it's completely set up how I've approached my career subsequently. I learned a great deal about myself and how I learn best, and I was a visibly different medical student when I came back into my clinical training. So there are paths for everybody, and it was just a very informative process for me.
So you've touched a little bit on how your path has differed from other people. Let's hear that. Tell us your career journey.
Okay. So I would really like to start off at school, if that's okay, because I think I envisage possibly quite a lot of people are about school age thinking about medicine. And I was very much one of those people. I liked to take opportunities when they were presented to me. My background is I don't have any medics in my family. I was only the second person in my generation to go to university. Nobody prior to that had gone to university in my family. So I'm trying to give you a backdrop to my educational profile. My family, therefore, were immensely supportive of education. You know, they really, have instilled that in me. And so I just went for it. I tried to do as much as I could, even if I was rubbish at it. I loved music and sport and drama. I tried it all. And on reflection, even if I didn't do things as well as other people, which was inevitable, I understood how to relate to different groups of people. And I think in reflection at school, that really helped. And it certainly helps if you're going into a public-facing specialty, being able to relate to different groups of people. I realised as well that filling up your diary and being busy was probably good training for when you became a junior doctor, and that was definitely the case. So I, as you heard, applied to Birmingham Medical School. I visited lots of different places. I was projected really good grades. Being from the West Midlands, the last thing I anticipated was to get the feels at Birmingham University. If you told me as a GCSE student, okay, you come from Coventry, you're going to go to Birmingham University, I'd be like, no way, far too close to home. But I visited one day and it just struck a chord. It was friendly. It was everything I wanted in a place. That's not to say that other places weren't great too. And I visited lots of different institutions, but that's what I wanted. I got in, and as you heard, I had a long time there. I really enjoyed myself. It's a large medical school, and I had identified actually in my biology A-level that I had really kind of enjoyed immunology and hematology. It actually went on my UCAS form, which I forgot about until a few weeks ago when my parents reminded me. And Birmingham had a really great reputation for immunology research. And so I went there, having pretty much been a straight A student at school, and went into this environment where I was full of people as capable as I was, suddenly became run-of-the-mill and average. And you struggle with that initially.
It must have been a difficult transition, actually.
It is. It's not to be underestimated. I mean, it's obviously a hugely exciting time. You're late teenage years. You're moving away from home for many people, and so it's all mitigated with that sense of excitement. But the challenge to becoming your own independent learner is very huge, and I'm keen to relay to people how important it is to identify how best you learn. And it is something I think that you only really start to get used to when you are in an independent environment at university, for example. It wasn't then until my second year, really, that I encountered immunology again. And I'd forgotten how much I'd liked it, and something clicked. And it was like, yeah, all of a sudden I've gone from being run-of-the-mill to, again, like realizing that, I'm good at this, and lots of my yeah, and different members of my peer group were better at other things than I was, but this was where I kind of shone a little bit. And I think sometimes when you're good at something, you end up liking it a bit more, and it's natural, isn't it? And so that's when I decided I wanted to learn a bit more. The thing with medicine is that by necessity, it's very broad. So to start with, you don't necessarily get to the meat of the matter. And I found that intercalating and doing more science for a year allowed me the opportunity to go into more depth. Again, that was immunology, pathology, and I loved it. It was the first time I felt like I'd really gone into depth. And my research project got me into a laboratory for the first time at university, and I adored that. And that was the PhD in the group that I applied for. So without wanting to bore people, I ended up studying how the body makes T cells, which fight viruses, and how those cells are educated not to attack our own bodies, and remain specific for other things, like other cells, other people's cells, or infection. So again, those lessons have stayed with me and informed like what I've become passionate about later on in my career too. But I never lost the fact that I wanted to be a doctor throughout all of that. I never kind of lost the desire to treat people. So I then returned back to medicine and medical training. And I'd gone from a situation whereby I'd been spoon-fed, to pass A-levels a bit, and all the rest of it, to trying to becoming an independent learner at university, writing loads of notes the whole time, so time-consuming, to coming back thinking, I'm not a note taker. I realized after doing a PhD and writing a book on my research, I can't write anymore. I needed to be able to I needed to be able to understand a process and understand it from first principles. But if I had that understanding, then I was much better at retaining things. And I think that's when I also realized I wasn't going to be a surgeon. I didn't have enough photographic memory to remember exactly where a nerve originated or inserted, or anything else like that.
That's important if you're a surgeon.
Yes, there are again different skills for different subsets. So I knew then that I wanted to pursue more the physician route. And when a great facet, a really exciting part of medical school is your medical elective. And I'd always maintained that I wanted to do something which probably treated people with cancer. It's always a very noble endeavor. That background interest in hematology and the immune system naturally lent itself to thinking about blood cancers. Yeah. So with some of the people I've met at the university through my PhD, I was enabled and helped to get an elective placement in Seattle at the Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center, where they invented bone marrow transplant. So I spent 3 months there when I was 27 in my penultimate year at med school. And that was an extraordinary experience that I will treasure. And that was it. I knew then, yes, the aim for me is to do this. It treated people's cancers with a new immune system, and that just it ticked every box. Like, what else possibly could I want to do, given my interests? So I then qualified for med school, and the West Midlands is a really big area, 10 million people in a conglomerate of cities. So there were plenty of job opportunities, which included training in haematology. So I applied for some foundation training, which incorporated that, and started practicing medicine. Again, this was the next step, which was huge, recognizably. And it definitely, every job I've had, you start from scratch. You feel anxious, you don't know what you're going to do, but there are just basic premises and basic practices which mean that you are going to be safe, and always having a relatable approach to staff, any staff, not just other medics, is hugely important. I can absolutely tell you I learned just as much from my nursing colleagues and physio colleagues as I have done from consultant colleagues and bosses. So I've been very fortunate with those learning experiences. Again, though, I did my 4 years of foundation and medical training, and I was just like champing at the bit to get back to do some science, to be honest. These they're like internal itches, you can't quite scratch them. There's something that just nags at you. Yeah. And that's always a sign to me that I need to be doing something about it. If it keeps you up at night, or if it's just something that won't leave you. So I looked into routes to get back into science. Again, was greatly supported by some fabulous mentors, and ended up undertaking a postdoc, and that's really catapulted me forward into a situation where I've been subsequently able to combine my haematology training with the pursuit of laboratory science. So I think I've waffled a lot, but it's a long career path to talk about. But it's exciting because in a month's time, I actually start work as a consultant in bone marrow transplant, with subspecializing in the complications of it. So it's happened. Yeah. So that's my career path.
From an outside perspective, it does seem like it was quite organic in terms of the way that your career kind of went. There was these, from the outside, you can see that there was a little idea that may have sprung and then you forgot about it, but it made sense later on, and that's where you've got to where you've got to. So I think the advice for our listeners there would be just to throw yourself into different experiences, because you never know what's going to come out of it, and what you go in thinking might not be where you end up exactly. Something you didn't touch on is work experience. Now, I've heard a little rumor that you had work experience in a dentist. Is that true? Yeah. And how has that supported you?
Yeah, it absolutely is. Thanks, Hope. I'm glad you came back to it. As I said, I didn't have any medical contacts, not even a friend, family. Just wasn't, the circles that my family were able to keep. And as a result, I really struggled. And it was at that time, late 90s, there was no meaningful internet to go searching on or to get like wonderful resources such as this. So I was complaining one day to the dentist that I'd had since I was a kid.
No,
and yeah, I was having a bit of a whinge, and he essentially just invited me to go and say with him. He said, "Look, I know I'm not going to persuade you to be a dentist, but it doesn't matter. It's primary care. It's medical service. Yeah, exactly." And that I just jumped at the chance. I spent a fortnight just shadowing him and his practice. I learned lots. I spent a day with the manager learning how on earth you manage a primary care service. How does that work? All of these things are translatable to the different spheres, and it goes for nursing, it goes for physiotherapy, occupational therapy. They're all very much care providing. And that was it. I was asked about it justifiably at interview. Why did you go to a dentist? Because it looks like maybe I was considering that too. But as soon as I said in my interview, it was the only primary care experience I could get, they thought, fair enough.
Yeah.
And then I did manage to then eventually, just before finishing school, get into an orthopedic hospital. And that was actually via contacts I met by visiting the medical school. You show an interest, you go and speak to people, and they were able to show me the routes. So I would definitely advise anybody watching this, if you are struggling, get on the internet, ask groups of students who are already there. What did you do? What happens at your institute? Particularly at the moment, post-COVID, everyone's in a huge state of flux. Look for the virtual experiences, speak to people, and think outside the box. For my consultant interview, I had to speak to lots of different people, and some of the best people I spoke to actually were the managers. Find out who the managers of big NHS trusts are, or your general practices, and they really had to nail the strategy for a lot of these changes, and they will know better than sometimes the people on the coalface what the proper pressures are on services. So just don't be afraid to ask. Put yourself out there and ask.
Or if that fails, just go to your dentist and have a nag. There you go. So we're going to move on to some of your hurdles and milestones. So far, it seems like your career journey was quite smooth sailing. So were there any setbacks along the way? What were they, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a cliche, but I seriously mean it, where your failures are your most valuable learning experiences. And failure is a horrible word, and people are scared of it.
It's a hard word, isn't it? Big word.
Yeah, it really is. But so I failed before I even went to med school. I know I did really well with my grades and stuff, but the first time I sat a particular maths module, I got an E. I had to resit it. So and what that taught me was that the reason I got an E was because I hadn't spent the time learning for that module. I was doing the other one, and I passed the other one fine, but it showed me, you have to spend time on this. You have to dedicate
yourself.
Not a winner.
You've got to sit down and learn it.
I was never a quick learner. I couldn't just pick up mathematics like that. It took me a while, and but that challenged me. I had to change the way I learned, and I passed it second time. And then like I've touched on already, the challenge in becoming an independent learner is nothing to be sniffed at. And that was huge. During my PhD, I loved my work. It was, all PhDs are novel research. They should be novel research. And part of the challenge is to get it published in an international journal. I was 21 going to 24 when I did my PhD. And as a result, you have this, you have to have faith in the supervision and the guidance you're receiving. And I didn't publish my research from that PhD. And that was a huge challenge for me subsequently. PhD is, I'm so proud of what I did. But that always plagued me because people said, well, what happened? Why didn't you?
One of those issues in the back of your mind.
It doesn't look. And doing that research, and it is very. There's no PhD that's easy. I'm happy to talk about the fact that I had panic attacks in my second year during it. It's hugely stressful. So, but those experiences showed me how I cope with stress, and I've now got much better coping mechanisms for that. And it's never happened again. So what doesn't get you makes you stronger. And
it's like a little block towards your success, isn't it? Each little
and but these things always stand you in good stead. Like I would never have been able to get the elective placement I got without that background with a PhD. I would not have been, as competitive afterwards for the jobs I went for. So these are all things that have been additive for me. So as a result, I had a big gap when I came back from research. There was the 3 years finishing med school and then 4 years of training before you'd be in a position to really step out again and do further research. And the training schemes didn't really exist to give you the funding to do that. And two, 7 years is a hard thing to justify to people who want to hire you to do more research. I had to work very hard to show people that I was, somebody that should be given the opportunity to do more laboratory research.
You meant business.
It's all been, there are definite stepping stones there. And the truth of the matter was that when I came back a second time round, 7 years later, I was more mature. I knew what I was about. I had my own ideas. I understood the area. I understood what the important questions were to ask. And I wanted to see if I could do it for myself. And so I sought out a group wherein I could work. I've had a fantastic mentor throughout all of this period who's really guided me and focused me. And as a result, it's been successful. But that drive, that there has to be an element of determination, if you like. And it's that phrase, where there's a will, there's a way. And I think my return to science at least showed that where there was a will, there was a way. And I think it's much more a smooth story in terms of my clinical training. That made more sense. Following that, the last challenge has been securing a consultant post. And sometimes there's luck involved in all of these, right place, right time. The PhD project thing, you can be the best scientist and the hardest worker and things just maybe don't go off. And some people are just, doing the right project at the right time and all of a sudden they get, lucky. So you've just got to roll with the opportunities and learn from the challenges or mistakes that happen and come your way.
I like the word challenges, and I like the word, because it's like all about your perspective, isn't it? You see it as a part of the process. It's not a failing, it's part of it. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think what I've mainly learned from most of this is that if things do or don't work out, it doesn't matter. They've all been worthwhile endeavors, and nothing that's worthwhile is easy. There's no such thing. So you've just got to do your best and do what makes you happy. And I personally, that people talk a lot about work-life balance when it comes to medicine and healthcare professions. And when they say that, they're often referring to people not having enough time at home. But I am a big advocate of, if you don't actually think about what interests you and you spend most of your professional life doing, the balance will never be right. You're always not going to be wanting to be doing what you're meant to do 50 to 70% of your time. So it's really important to give yourself the chance to do what inspires you.
Now, in the bio in this session today, I introduced you and I said about that there being a demand for skilled physicians, scientists, and medical professionals, and that the fact that's continued to increase over the past few years. With that being said, what changes have you seen over the course of your career?
So I would say a couple of things. If I take it from the clinical perspective first, maybe, and then try and mesh the two, I would say that there is more of an awareness now for the need for flexible training, and both for women who inevitably, unfortunately, it is an inevitability, that if you decide you want to have a family, then you've got a lot of pressure. And that's just the reality of the situation. But there's been a very big acceptance that needs to be supported, and less than full-time training for many circumstances is now a right for trainees. So that's very positive. Then there's also been quite a shift to accept that this phrase whistleblowing it is to be recognised and supported. And there's been some fundamental changes in hospital trusts and in primary care to support people of all healthcare professions to come forward if they think there are things that need changing. And I think that there's a far greater no blame culture evolving, which is very healthy. Now, this doesn't mean to say that it's perfect. There's still, I tweeted the other day, actually, a wonderful tweet for, I don't recall who it is now, but a trust that has a system called Ratix. Most systems in a hospital would be called Datix, and it's where you can submit like a problem, an incident, something went wrong, complaint, whatever. But there's nothing to otherwise say or compliment somebody or say, look what we did well. And this trust has instigated a Greatix system. And I think that is now becoming more commonplace, where people are willing to not only accept the challenge of improving patient care and allowing people to come forward with ideas or complaints and suggestions, but also trying to acknowledge when practice is good and praising that and feeding back positively.
What a brilliant a little thing that can help morale, and people feel like their job is worthwhile and they're doing good things.
Yeah, exactly. I think we all benefit from a little bit of praise every now and then. And sometimes, times such as now, it's definitely required. So, I think that's getting better. And I think there's much better protection on working hours now. I remember when I started out, there was still, I'll call them dinosaurs, who were like, oh, I would be on call for like 3 days in the trot. But they didn't have the workload that we have these days in the NHS. And it's intense. And most doctors now are, and most healthcare professionals are very happy to support people and make sure that working hours are adhered to. So I think they're the clinical positives about working in medicine. I think the role of a physician scientist is definitely improving. So there's increased, there was the classic cliched opinion of a doctor trying to be a scientist, that you're rubbish in the lab, that you don't know what you're doing, and that you just presume to know it all. That's the classic impression. And I think now, though, that I think it's fair to say that most scientists will appreciate that we bring a novel and important perspective on work with, you know the questions, you know what the point is. So yeah, feel free to go and investigate the mechanisms of how DNA repairs itself.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't know that that is what will lead to cancer, then you're not really informing it in a fashion that's going to help society forward. So the problems obviously are that in global recessions, pandemics, funding gets pulled in different directions. So people may have very, very noble questions that deserve answers, but sources of funding are challenging at the moment. I'm not sure they're going to get better in the next few years, but one can hope.
One can hope indeed. Now, I've got so many questions for you, but I've also had so many questions coming in from our audience. So we're going to jump straight to them because that's why we're here, to help everyone. So we'll start with this one. What is your top tips for preparing for medicine entry exams such as UCAT and Bmat? If I've said them wrong.
No, that's perfect. So I have solicited a bit of advice on this from students in med school at the moment, who are obviously a bit closer to that process than I am. And I think on a practical perspective, think about booking your UCAT slot early. Think about how it fits in with what else you've got on. You will need about a month to prepare. So, summer's a good time. Take 3 to 4 weeks off and just then, potentially blitz it. The practice questions, and this is true for every stage of your career, they're part of the challenge of passing exams is to be in the frame of mind, and you only get that practice when you only achieve that when you've practiced it. I believe that UK CAT is quite time pressured when you're in it, so practice questions. There are online question banks, there are books you can purchase. I believe there are courses you can do. However, I would presume that these are more expensive. And I think that one of the other top tips I'll always give if you're doing something that's multiple choice is if just put an answer down. Don't worry about it. Just put something down. When you get your results back, I would also recommend reflecting on what you've achieved in it, because it'll probably tell you a lot about yourself and you as a learner. And you can look at how universities or medical schools are judging those scores. So, for example, if you do well and you have a good score on situational awareness, if you're not truly fussed about which university you want to go to, look to see which universities are going to rank that highly, and consider that. So there are ways that you can tailor your results to a place that's going to suit you best. Even if you don't do well, though, don't be disheartened. Ultimately, these are just guides, and everybody's different. There are many different people with many different personalities, all of whom are fantastic doctors. And these tests are just very broad sweeping, and they're applied to try and just filter it, because medicine, fortunately, remains popular, and I'm glad of that. I would suggest, though, that it's far more important to come across as a balanced, reflective person at an interview than it is to just get great scores. So don't worry too much, but they would be my tips. I hope they're helpful.
Yeah, I think they were, Francesca. Thank you for them. Due to this year's coronavirus situation, work experience is quite hard to find. Dentists have been closed. But is it a required aspect to apply for medical school? Therefore, do you think it will be different this year? What shall we do if we struggle to find a placement?
I really sympathise. It's been a huge challenge, and unfortunately, I think going forward, there will be restrictions on certain placements that people can have. That's simply for safety, and that will have to be acknowledged at a university level. Indeed, if you went pursuing an inappropriate placement, that won't do you any favours. So be reasonable and don't put yourself and others at risk. When it comes to how you might otherwise source decent work experience, again, I'll encourage you to use all of these medias that you can. This is a great link. Email people, look at trust websites, look for the online virtual experiences, and speak. Go to town on your social media. I enjoy Twitter. I use Twitter quite professionally. Find people who do what you do or are doing what you want to do. Follow them and engage. There are some fantastic resources out there, and if you are of a mind to find them, they will be helpful. Do everything that you can do. Again, I'm conscious that courses cost and not everybody is able to afford them. I'm conscious of that because that was the situation I was in. But this is your life plan. If you can afford it, do the courses. Just tick all the boxes you can. Yeah.
How do you stand out in medical school interviews?
By being yourself, and knowing yourself. So there is, in any interview, I would suggest that if you're asked a question, try not just to answer it. That sounds paradoxical, but if you asked me, what is it that makes a good doctor? I'm not just going to say you have to be compassionate and you have to be thoughtful. I'm going to tell you need to be compassionate, and then I'm going to give you examples of how I've done that and show you what I've done. I would encourage people to find a politician, one that you can tolerate, because let's face it, some of them are annoying.
It might be hard to do that.
But what I'm going to say is politicians are great to learn from because they never answer a question, they respond. And what you need to do in interviews is you need to respond. So you need to tell people, okay, I've got an idea, and these are the traits that I think I've got. And try and practice always making those questions about you.
Yeah.
So if you get asked a question, make a statement, an opening statement, and then immediately start saying, this is the skill I want to tell you about, and this is how I can evidence I have that attribute. I think that's how you stand out in an interview. And inevitably, by doing that, you're going to be talking about yourself. And at the end of it all, what they want are people that are good medical students. You don't have to be the polished article. I think if you went in there and said, I want to be a neurosurgeon, they would go, all right, lovely. Yeah, well done. Maybe next year. I think if you go in and you say, I have an interest in neuroscience, I've really enjoyed that this year and I've done X, Y, and Z, and this is how I've developed as a result of that process, and it's something I'd really like to engage with, because guess what? Your medical school have this excellent program in neuroscience. That's a totally different answer. You might have a burning desire in your heart to be a neurosurgeon, but you've not come across arrogantly or that you've not got foresight. You've come across as if you've investigated it, you're a reflective learner, and that you know that their course is the only one for you.
Would you agree that regular voluntary work in a caring capacity is better for prospective medical students than lots of scattered work experience in less depth?
I think that's an interesting one. I think if you'd asked me pre-COVID, then I would be tempted to agree. Only in as much as that it shows dedication.
Yeah.
And that's really important. And I myself have very, very fond memories of just doing a tea round on a Thursday evening at my local hospital on a geriatric ward. And it was delightful. And I got a lot from that. I mean, I only spent 45 minutes on the ward per week, but I did it for 18 months, 2 years. And it was great. So there is an awful lot to be gained from doing something regularly. Again, I think for the upcoming few years, it will be acknowledged that perhaps those sorts of things aren't going to be possible. But this is where people can get creative. Okay, again, the internet is a huge platform. And, there are an awful lot of people who are isolated at the minute, self-isolating. try, maybe set something up yourself, see what you can get off the ground, even if it's just with neighbors that you can't see. You know, just do things which are achievable. And the important thing is always to reflect on it and show what you got from it and how that makes you a good prospective medical student or nursing student or whatever. It's not about what you did, but it's what you learned from it and how that's put you forward as a better candidate.
Yeah, and something that might help the audience who are watching today, we've had some previous employer masterclasses. We've spoken about ways that people can prepare for interview, and there's a model called the STAR model, which is all about the task in itself, but then the reflection, which links nicely into what you're saying. So perhaps go and watch some of those videos and kind of adjust that to the medical profession. Now, you touched on this a little bit in terms of the working hours being more monitored, and you spoke about how it doesn't really feel like work because you enjoy it. But someone has said, do you think it's possible to have a good work-life balance as a doctor? For example, do you have enough time for your family?
Really excellent question. Honestly, I think it's something I ask myself every day. And I am a mother now. I have a 4-year-old nearly, and it's hugely challenging. I go back to what I say though, in that work-life balance works both ways. This is where location comes into it.
Yeah.
I have been fortunate that I've always had opportunities. I've applied for jobs elsewhere in the country at different stages of my career, but I've always had the opportunities in the West Midlands and I've taken them. I'm a bit unusual in that fact because medicine's one of the most mobile professions there is, and people get scattered all over the country depending upon what they want to do and where the training opportunities are, where the jobs are. What I would say is that I would not have been able to do everything I've done without the support of my family. And many of my friends are doctors, so I've not been able to rely on them. And I am always in awe of people who live away from their families and manage to train. And this is the importance of less than full-time training. But I'm a Midlander by birth. I'm surrounded by my family, and location, I think, is going to be increasingly important. I'm so glad that I am close to my family, particularly in pandemics and everything else. And it really brings those elements home. I would never necessarily have considered those aspects at the age of 18. But in retrospect now, as you know, a 39-year-old about to become a consultant with a little girl, the fact that she's able to have a relationship with her grandmother and her grandfather and her other grandparents, and I've got that support network that if something does come up, you know, it's inevitable. I will have late clinics. It's inevitable, as it has been in the past, that I've got an emergency to deal with and I simply can't leave work. That there's that backup there. And it's really an important consideration. It's not impossible, but I will give credit where it's due. You know, I think I would have been made to have had different career decisions if I didn't have that support.
Relating to that as well, but in terms of friendships rather than family, is it true that people who study medicine have no social life?
No. Again, I really hope that COVID doesn't ruin this in terms of university experiences. But that's the other tip: is people check out what medical schools are doing about COVID and the learning. A lot of it's going to go online with recorded lectures, which is great. The content will all be there. But it's a hugely social thing. You know, you're at university for 5 to 6 years. You'll be on clinical placements with people. These people inevitably become your friends. And I've got, you know, a handful of friends from school that I keep in touch with, many more on Facebook. But you know, my best friend is also a doctor. My husband is a doctor. We're all fairly like-minded, and I get enough challenges. I've got a big family, my family and my friends as well. I am challenged enough. it's inevitable that sometimes you need like-minded people in your corner that get it.
It's quite funny how you said earlier that your family, none of them were medics, and now you've kind of got your own family, your best friend and your husband who are medics. It's quite funny how you've gone from them to.
It's well balanced, is the way I would put it. You know, you need it all. I don't really talk about medicine with my family, you know, because it's separate and apart from my family, you know. But for the rest of them, when we're together, you know. So it's important to have those lines. It's important to have people in your corner. But you need that balance of support and those that will honestly challenge you.
Talking about support, how do you deal with stress and workload when studying?
Again, I think practice comes to mind. This will always be something that you are questioned on, and it's totally fair game. I even had it again as a question in a consultant interview. You need to identify the things that help chill you out. They may change over time, and try where possible to make them healthy pursuits. So I've always loved music, doing it and going to gigs. I was a bit of a 90s alternative music rock fan, and that just persists to this day. So literally in my consultant interview, they asked me, what would your best friend say about you on a bad day? And my response was, she'll possibly be a little less smiley and she'll need to listen to a bit more rock music to get through the day. It's just human. I used to play a lot of netball and sport. I have less opportunity to do that now with a little one and you know, working full time. But I try to keep fit. So I think it's identifying the things that truly relax you. They're not going to be the same for everybody, but you've got to have something.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like how earlier we spoke about failings, and then kind of they allow you to look within yourself and to understand yourself. And the same applies for the ways that you relax. If you are stressed out and burnt out, you then learn these mechanisms, don't you? So you kind of have to go through something to then understand yourself better.
Yes.
What do you love? This is a big question. Brace yourself. What do you love the most about working in the field of medicine?
The people. It's easy.
Oh, I thought you were going to struggle with that.
Yeah.
Really.
No, I think that's why I always knew I was going to be a doctor and not a scientist, because not that scientists don't work with people, but I wanted to work with patients. I wanted to engage, you know, and it's hugely challenging, particularly cancer care, and a lot of my patients die, you know, and you deal with that personally and how you will, but there's not a day that goes by that I can't identify something. Oh, yeah, I think they appreciated that.
Yeah.
And that's the difference with medicine. You're always going to have that every day. There's a lovely little daily snippet of satisfaction. Some days more than others, some days not at all. But you know, they are there. Science is more the long-term game. It's hugely frustrating and challenging at times, but then you get a breakthrough or something works, and it's
so amazing.
Huge. Yeah, and it's exciting. So they trade off each other. But yeah, I can't think of. And for me, hematology in particular, you know, I get to see a patient. I get to diagnose the fact that they may have a blood cancer. I do that, and I look down the microscope. I do the biopsy of their marrow. I get to go and make that diagnosis, and then I get to go back and treat the patient. So there is no other medical specialty that does that.
Yeah. How much, obviously, you have to have quite difficult conversations, I'm sure, and there must be times where it's quite panicky. And have you had any communications training in terms of that side of things? Was that involved in your medical training?
They certainly, most medical schools now will have a focus on communication, and I completely agree. You can be the cleverest, most smart person there is, but if you can't talk to people, it's worthless.
Yeah.
And I talk to people. I hope, the same way irrespective of who they are. So I talk to the cleaners on the ward and the ward clerks and the staff on reception the same way as I do to the professors. They may think they deserve a bit more respect, but they're getting the same treatment from me. Yeah, and I think that's just how it is. People think there's a magic trick to communication. There really isn't. Just be open. And I think the most important thing is sometimes just being open to what patients want to know and being mindful of that. They know you're there to do a job. It's not hard. You just have to listen, and you'll get there eventually. Communications are. It sounds easy for me saying it like that, but we do training at every step of the career to make sure that people are well equipped to do what they do, and different communication styles are needed for different sorts of endeavours. So cancer care is one thing that talking to somebody who may have a neurological problem, that requires a different amount of skill again. So there will be a baseline that's expected by the time you're a doctor, but you don't need to have those skills honed for your medical school interview. I think it's just as important to be a good listener as it is to be a good talker.
This is quite a broad question. Someone said here, what is the main difference between the roles of a doctor and a nurse?
Yeah, good. I like that question. I would caveat what I'm going to say by saying that there are, as I've said in the beginning of this webinar, I've learned just as much from nursing colleagues as I have from my medical colleagues. And if a nurse that I work with on my ward, and I will maintain this as a consultant, says jump, I'll ask how high. So, please bear this in mind. I perceive that my job is to support a patient's journey by establishing diagnoses and advising and recommending treatments, and then following those patients through with those treatments and monitoring them for response or for failure of response. Nursing colleagues have to develop the expertise in caring every day, for observing. They spend so much more time with patients than we do as doctors. They need to establish very excellent avenues of communication. They need to really monitor patients' vital signs. They need to recognize when those signs are going awry so that they can ask for support from I can't say the word, diagnostician, that's what I am, to come and see maybe what the problem is. Quite frequently, the best of nurses will know what that problem is and tell you and help you with that. And then they have to be trained also to deliver the treatment. So I might prescribe something, but the numbers of times a patient will ask me, oh, I have that yellow tablet. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. I prescribe it, I'll know the name of it, I'll know the dose. But the nurses are responsible for actually formulating drugs, administering them safely, making sure that all lines are there. I would recommend spending a day at least with, if you get to med school, at least a day with an ITU nurse. I'm telling you now, you'll view them all in a different way. They multitask like there's no tomorrow. And then, you have your advanced nurse practitioners. So these are people that actually are able to prescribe, and they do most of the liaison with patients. And a lot of nurses, most nurses are fantastic managers. So many of them reach quite high echelons in practice. So your nursing colleagues have very wide-ranging skills, and they are there, one, to support you, but also you've got to support them. They provide the care that you recommend.
Francesca, if it's okay with you, because we've got this very special talk today with someone from medical profession, we've got so many questions, would you be okay to go over by 5 minutes? Would that be okay?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, if everybody's interested.
No, thank you so much. It's because we're speaking to someone from the medical profession. We haven't yet on Learn Lounge. So we've got so many questions and we want to try and answer as many as possible. So appreciate that from you. So next one then, let's get on before 5 minutes is up. You're both a lecturer as well as a practitioner. Do you feel that education is preparing young people for practical work?
So I feel that this I will talk about this in relation to medicine. So in regards to medical training, it has always been and remains an apprenticeship. And the very first few years of medical school, whether you apply for a course that is problem-based learning or more lecture-based, in the first few years, it has to just give you the nuggets of knowledge that you require to be safe. Thereafter, and it may be earlier in some courses than others still, you are learning on the job. And I would on a very simplistic basis, equate it to learning to drive. You learn how to be safe when you go to medical school, but you get most of your experience when you've passed your test and you're out doing the job. It's the same with medicine. And therefore, I can say yes. For medicine and for nursing in particular, nursing you're on the wards really early on, then you are trained to do a job. And it's good that going forward, even postgraduate medical training now has lots of curricula. So I think I can say that as an affirmative. It would be out of my remit to comment on other courses at universities, and I think it's really important that going forward there are various avenues of opportunity for people to pursue a style of education and post-school training for whatever they want to do in life. And university is always the right way there, but I'm talking out of remit.
I think a big thing that we want to try and encourage people at Learn Lounge is that anything is possible. If just because you haven't heard of a job doesn't mean it doesn't exist or won't exist. So don't be scared and explore different avenues.
And
this next question.
Can I just say one more thing? I would also say that if you're not certain about medicine, it is just at the end of the day still a degree. And I can think of at least 5 people offhand that have completed a medicine and surgery degree and then gone to do other things very successfully and not at all related to medicine. One whom I'm perhaps a little bit envious of is a banker. And done very well for herself. So, it really is, at the end of the day, the opportunity to learn something. And it's just a matter of what you take from that course, whether you pursue a career as a doctor or not. You don't just, that's not the only reason to study medicine.
We've got time to squeeze in one more question. Would you recommend doing 3 or 4 A-levels for medicine?
I think you have to look at yourself and you have to be true to yourself about what you're going to achieve. I think it is a reflection of grades because there are the candidates there to choose from. I would say it's far more important to get 3 robust, excellent grades to meet whatever the offers are than it is to try and push yourself and do 4 and then not achieve 3, if that makes sense. Depends on how that's going to be structured for you. And what you don't want to do is not enjoy what you're studying. At every point, you have to ask yourself, are you enjoying this? And there are means to the ends. And I would always ask, clearly studying isn't always fun and revising for exams is stressful. So you're not going to enjoy that. But you need to ask yourself why. Why am I learning this? Why is it important? What's underneath all of this? What's the skill I'm getting from it? And if you're not going to get all of that experience because you're stressed out doing 4 of them, maybe consider it again. But just there will be people around you that can help you with these decisions, both hopefully in your educational institution and in your support network, whatever that might be.
Wow, what a brilliant session we've had today. I think the 2 main themes that I want to take away, and I think the audience should as well, is that you've said to look within yourself, to learn your own styles of how you learn and what you want to do, and ultimately find something that you enjoy. And I really like all of those things that you've covered. So thank you so much for spending this time with us today, Dr. Francesca.
No, it's a pleasure. And good luck to everybody out there and stay well.
Thank you so much. So just to remind us, everyone who's here with us now, the Children's Trust is the UK's leading charity for children with brain injury. And if you would like to donate to help rehabilitate these children, you can click on the link on the screen now and do so. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Some fantastic questions. Dr. Francesca, thank you so much for taking this time today. And everyone, will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.